meeting of the whole for Wednesday, January the 2nd. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Calling the roll, Mr. Brady. Here. Mr. Germana.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Schron.
Here.
Ms. Conwell.
Here.
Mr. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Rogers.
Here.
Ms. Simon.
Here.
Mr. Greenspan.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Present.
And Ms. Conley.
Here.
There is a quorum.
Item 3 is the public comment related to the agenda. However, we have some rather lengthy matters relating to property, and I understand that there are a number of citizens who wanted to talk to us on a couple of matters, and rather than having them wait for that extended period of time, I thought we would just go ahead and take them now. So, Madam Clerk, do you want to call those folks forward? Each one of you have 3 minutes, and you have you can come to the microphone and please say your name. And do we need the court reporter to take down those comments?
Not if they're on the...
Yeah, I'm used to being a judge. I always want to save the fingers of the court reporter if we don't.
The first two persons who have requested to speak are related to the agenda.
Okay, if they're related to the agenda, she needs to take them.
Mr. Kevin Brokaw.
Good evening. I'm Kevin Brokaw. I'm the General Counsel with the Geis companies. We just wanted to say that we appreciate the opportunity and we're excited about being part of the project with the county initiatives 1 and 3 with the Ameritrust complex and the new county headquarters. We came tonight to make ourselves available to answer any questions should they come up during the presentation. And then just to kind of keep the conversation going, we've continued our communications with Downtown Cleveland Alliance about the use of the rotunda. Had very good positive feedback from both public and private sectors with regard to our proposal since it's met the public. And so we're very excited about it and look forward to continuing our relationship with the county and further investment on the city of Cleveland. So thank you.
Thank you.
The next person is Doug Nagy.
Hi, my name is Doug Nagy, and I'm also speaking on behalf of my buddy Joe Bauer, who couldn't be here because I think he's still enjoying the holiday. So thank you for working today. We're both young, we're both 26, we both grew up in the suburbs and are moving back into the city that our grandparents left. And we're both very passionate about downtown, and so we're very excited about the innovative use of public investment to spur residential and retail development. There's been too many things that are built, like the stadium and those sorts of projects, that didn't fully leverage the neighborhoods they were connected to. So we're very excited about this project. But we had one tweak that we thought could make the project even more powerful. We're both students of urban planning. I'm currently in business school at the University of Chicago, but before that I built a Main Street program to revitalize the neighborhood I grew up in, out in Paynesville. So I have some background in urban planning. And one of the things that, the only item I didn't like out of the county plan...
I know you only have 3 minutes, but you need to slow down a little bit.
Sorry. Yeah, so what our tweak that we'd like to suggest to the county plan is to eliminate the skywalk over Prospect Avenue. Other cities, Columbus, Cincinnati, Baltimore, are spending millions of dollars to take down their skywalks for one very basic reason, that it takes people off the street. And I was very excited to hear that one of the purposes of the new county headquarters is to create vibrancy at the street level, but it's hard to do that without pedestrians. If you look at the picture on this, and I've seen tons of urban plans, and they all have the same exact thing in them, and that's little people drawn in on the street. And a lot of times they're overestimated of how many people will actually be on the street. But we want to do everything that we can to create that pedestrian vibrancy. And so I have a packet here that I put together for council, New York Times article and several other articles about cities eliminating these skywalks, and how important it is for us to consider that. I think it's actually make the project cheaper to not have to build a new skywalk across the street. And then one way to contrast that is if you look at the Cleveland Clinic, there are tens of thousands of employees in this neighborhood around the Cleveland Clinic, yet there's almost no pedestrians. I counted 2 as I drove by today. When you drive through downtown, almost all of the pedestrians around at 5 o'clock are coming to or from work. And so that's where the pedestrians are generated. And so if we're very passionate about bringing new life to East 9th Street, we should consider eliminating the skywalk and having everything at the pedestrian level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, next speaker.
Our next speaker would like to speak on something that is unrelated to the agenda, and his name is, it looks like Clinton Thomas.
Okay, Mr. Thomas, and we can go off the record.
Hello, my name is Clinton Thomas.
I represent a group called Boyhood and Manhood's Rights of Path, and then another group called the African American Council. It's a grassroots group that Paul Hill started in the day. The issue that I'm dealing with is attention visitors, new jail visitor rights. The following changes to inmate visitation reservations will go into effect beginning January 1st, 2013. All new residents identified being formally incarcerated at this jail will not be permitted to visit unless they are the parents or grandparents of the inmates. Minors under the age of 5 will not be permitted into the visitation area. Inmates will receive a maximum of 30 minutes of visitation per week. Reason that I want to address the issue because Ronald Sharpie himself told me personally, if he was in Mississippi, inmates would not be able to visit their ex-friends or their family members. I'm saying, according to the law, the United States Constitution and the Ohio State Constitution, the Cuyahoga County law, and also the city laws, you only lose the right to bear arms. I'm saying that'd be taking us back almost 50 years. I'm saying people voted rights to be able to visit their family friends. I'm saying the people in the Cuyahoga County, 75% of the blacks have records. I'm saying 50% of poor whites have records. 60% of Puerto Ricans have records. So that'd be saying like you can't visit your family members. And that way you will not be able to support them. The reason I'm so concerned, because before I changed my life, I was a criminal. I'm saying, so I know the importance of somebody coming to support you in jail. I'm saying, and I'm saying that Ronald Sharpie, I'm saying that's an unconstitutional law. I'm saying that he gonna say that just in this county jail, no part of the state, you can't visit people. You know, he told me himself, he said in Mississippi, you wouldn't be able to do that. You wouldn't be able to do that in Alabama. And I told him this ain't Alabama, we in Cleveland, Ohio in 2013. I'm saying, but from that comment, he personally said I couldn't visit my first cousin and my best friend. He canceled my visit last Monday because I said it was not in Mississippi. I'm saying that's an issue that he wanted to take personally. You know, according to Bob Reed's book, which is the inmate handbook, 2013 policies is that you cannot do nothing to retaliate because if somebody says something, you cannot do revenge. I'm saying, see, Ellen Connolly, I remember you as a judge. You was a fair judge. I'm saying, I remember John T. Corrigan. I remember Stephanie Tubbs. I remember Muriel Mason. I mean, your laws, I'm saying, you got to be within the Constitution. And I'm saying, he can't make a law, I'm saying, outside the Constitution. The Constitution, they're a criminal. They just had another issue down the Phyllis Cleveland Ward 5. They said that you couldn't vote if you had a record. It was all over the media and everything. They said you couldn't vote. So Phyllis Cleveland and Frank Jackson, they addressed that issue.
Okay, thank you. And if you'd like to just leave your name with one of our staff people, and we'll check out your...
Okay, then I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate y'all giving me time, and y'all enjoy yourself, and Happy New Year.
Thank you very much. Someone will get your name. All right, do we have someone else that signed in?
Okay, yes, Fran Mensch. This is also unrelated to the agenda.
I'm sorry, I won't be as prepared as I thought I would be. I thought I would speak at the end. My name is Fran Mensch. I'm from Cleveland Heights, and I'm here because the Cuyahoga County Executive and the Court of Common Pleas appoint the Cuyahoga County Public Library Board. I'm concerned about the fiscal irresponsibility of this board regarding the South Euclid Lyndhurst branch of the Cuyahoga County Public Library, and I'm here to ask you to curb this fiscal irresponsibility. Without ever asking the community what they wanted, the board decided to spend $12.6 million to build a new library instead of spending $5 million to renovate the current library, the Telling Mansion, a building on the National Register of Historic Places, and an Ohio landmark. The County Library Board asks citizens to vote for their levies, but does not include citizens in the decisions about how to spend their money. The board's stubborn refusal to work with the South Euclid Lyndhurst community has alienated a lot of people. Many residents from all over the county have said that they will never again support a library levy. This board has alienated voters, and this jeopardizes the financial future of the county library system long after the current board members have moved on. We ask that the library board, we ask that you ask the library board to keep our library in the Telling Mansion, to take the Telling Mansion off the market immediately, and to conduct community meetings and a survey to get community input. It's important to note that the Telling Mansion, they have it up for sale with an outdated appraisal. I've sent some of you some information about that, beyond the date that the appraisal felt that the appraisal would be valid. They also have not, despite the fact that they've talked about this in documents that they've sent to the community, and also to the media, they have not taken either one of the two legal actions that you can to preserve an historic building. They have not contracted to have a preservation easement, nor have they developed any kind of legally binding deed, any kind of deed restriction, even though they put it on the market. These are all documents that I can show you. There are many things that you can do. You can talk to them formally or informally, individually or as a group, or set up a meeting with them and with the citizens who provide the money that the board is spending. Or you can urge them to conduct a survey to determine what the community wants. I hope you will take this concern about the fiscal irresponsibility of the Cuyahoga County Library Board into advisement, and there are many things that you can do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else signed in for comment?
Ms. Mensch, was Ms. Schaefer here? No, thank you. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Madam President, no one else has signed in to speak.
All right, thank you. Item 4, items referred to committee. Item 0264. Madam Clerk, would you like to read that, please?
Resolution number 2012-0264, a resolution awarding the sale of the Ameritrust complex and the entry of a lease for consolidated county headquarters at the site of the P&H buildings to Geis Property Management, LLC, authorizing the county executive to execute all necessary documents for same and authorizing the Director of Public Works to administer the project and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Now, this matter has been referred to the Committee of the Whole, and we're here this evening to hear two presentations, one about the process, and then we'll give an opportunity for any other comments. So I believe that we're ready with Mr. Jeffers to, he's going to give a brief explanation of the process that we went through so that the public can fully understand how this process was done.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you all taking the time to meet with us today, and I know that you've spent a lot of time deliberating on this matter over the previous months, and we've appreciated that time as well. We will make our remarks as quick as we can, but certainly there's a lot of material to cover, and we want to do our best to be quick but also comprehensive. Do we want to put the presentation up? So just would like to make some introductory comments and introduce as well Marion from URS, the architectural and engineering consultant that the county engaged during the summer to assist with this project. The first thing that we'd like to remind us of is how we all got here. And in a nutshell, a study was done in 2011 by Allegro, who was engaged by the county to do a full, thorough analysis of the entire real estate portfolio. That analysis came out with 3 main initiatives with the goals of reducing costs and creating a more effective real estate footprint for the county. Those initiatives were the acquisition of a consolidated headquarters, the acquisition of a consolidated storage facility, and the disposition of a number of leased and owned properties that the county no longer needed. The expected net effect was very impactful. Huge savings, tens of millions of dollars over 10, 20, many years into the future, a reduction in the footprint, and improved service offerings for the constituents, which are a less measurable but nonetheless equally important matter. We've done a little evaluation on what others in the public sector were doing as it regarded their real estate footprints, and what we learned after investigating this was really that what the world is doing, counties, cities, states, the federal government, really mirrors what your project is as well. So during the summer, we released an RFP document. It was a thorough document that really covered all 3 of these initiatives for the real estate consolidation. We did multiple initiatives in one document because we wanted to encourage and investigate any opportunities that might arise where you had interrelated proposals. If somebody had a proposal for the headquarters that was tied to storage or the sale of a property, we wanted to be sure to be able to do that evaluation when the time came. During July, we released this RFP and we rolled out our project. We embarked on a marketing campaign in July and August to have open houses at all the for sale properties and really encourage through this national campaign to get all offers in that we could for the headquarters and the storage facility. At every property that was for sale, we had 3 open houses that were each 2 to 4 hours. These resulted in over 240 visitors that, at least that registered. We did, I'm sure, have a couple of people that slipped through the cracks, but both local and out of area visitors who came and toured the properties that were for sale. And during September, while URS was developing the program for both the storage and the headquarters, in mid-September, we had all offers due from everybody on September 14th. And we ended up getting 43 different proposals from 25 organizations, which we were very pleased with. During October and November, we spent our time doing diligence on the proposals that came in. We scored them through the county's scoring process with the Public Works team, and we narrowed down everything to a short list, not just for your headquarters, but also for the storage and the sales options. And then we had numerous selection committees to analyze all of the offers that were on the table. So far, we've had 5 total meetings of that committee, each meeting about 4 to 5 hours each, and executive sessions with the executive and council. We've had 8 to this point, and each one has been about 2 to 4 hours each. So the scoring process is something that we wanted to be sure to touch on today. All members of the selection committee that the county appoints for any procurement process, and this could be everything from an engineering contract for roads to real estate. The selection committee gets together, reviews all the proposals, and decides as a group how to evaluate and score proposals when making decisions. The executive committee the selection committee that we had for this project was made up of 10 representatives. It included staff of the executives, the Department of Public Works, the Law Department, Economic Development, and obviously your consultants, CBRE and URS. And in the scoring process, the county decides to go, or the process is that the county will start with a midpoint in every single scoring category that you have within the RFP. So if a proposal is made and there are 5 sections, each one worth 20 points for a total of 100, the team will go through section by section. We'll determine a midpoint within that 20 to start from, and everybody gets assigned that midpoint. And then points are added or deducted as mutually agreed upon by the selection committee. Final scores after the selection committees are completed are submitted to the executive and ultimately county council for their review. So because it's a little bit easier to start with, we'd like to begin with the overview of the Initiative 3 proposals for the Ameritrust complex. Here tonight we're gonna address both the headquarters and the Ameritrust complex projects. But because Ameritrust is a little bit easier to understand and not quite as much detail, we'll start there. First, we wanted to give you an overview of the entire Initiative 3 that we embarked upon this summer. The properties for sale were 13 in the city of Cleveland and some in the suburbs within the county, a total of 1.6 million square feet. And the RFP that went out in this particular initiative scored every proposal that came in based upon a 100-point scale. And as you see here at the bottom of the page, here were the breakouts of each category and how they were weighted within that 100 points. So criteria that mattered within each of these categories included what you see here. For property and proposing parties, we were really focused on trying to make sure that we had quality buyers with a good track record of redevelopment. Economics was our largest category. Obviously, in a sale process, you want to make sure to weight the price that you get for a property pretty heavily. The terms and conditions for the sale was another category, really talking about what contingencies might have been tied to the sale of a property. A buyer's financing plan was scored as 15 out of 100, really just to make sure that we had somebody making an offer that could be executed upon. The intended use and redevelopment of all the properties that were for sale was very important to the county, wanting to make sure that any properties sold really were put back into use as quickly and effectively as possible. And environmental stewardship is also near to the county's heart. certainly wanting to make sure that any redevelopment of properties followed green technologies and protocols. So, as we said, we embarked upon this marketing campaign during the summer. We had a website established where people could log in and pull materials down from each of the initiatives and each of the properties being sold. We had print materials, we had an extranet for prospects looking to make proposals, and obviously floor plans and aerials and all the information that we could provide that were provided to us by the county. So when it came to actually getting into this disposition, we also thought it would be a good idea to remind us of where we came from, that this complex was acquired by the county over the course of a couple of different acquisitions, totaling $26.8 million. The county bought the main portion of the Ameritrust complex, connecting across into the main 8-story garage, and then subsequently, 2 years later, also bought the Optima garage. So it's a total of a $26.8 million real estate investment that the county has made on this particular parcel and property. This does not happen to include any other fees that were paid or costs that were incurred for construction or maintenance. This is simply the real estate transfer cost. So at the Ameritrust complex in 2012, when we went out and asked for offers, we actually received 8 different offers on the property. 3 of them were shortlisted for further investigation from Geis companies, Optima Ventures, and a partnership between Agnew Partners and Landmark Management. These 3 proposals were for all or substantially all of the complex. And unfortunately, the balance of the proposals were not shortlisted for the simple fact that we were hopeful, but we did not succeed in getting a number of proposals that could all be collectively put together for a multi-buyer package on the complex, and that never materialized. Each of the offers that came in couldn't be assembled into something that would have sold substantially all of the complex for you. So those were not shortlisted, and we moved forward with the 3 that really focused on the entire complex. The first to address is from the Geis companies. When we go through these deal points from each of the offers, what you will see are the revised offers that came through at the end of due diligence in November. So the offer that came in from on the Ameritrust acquisition from Geis was for a $27 million price. Their thoughts were to use the rotunda for either a public use or retail or some combination thereof, to use the tower as high-end residential, and the Sweatland 1010 building as office and residential. And their proposal, as many of you know, is to use the old P&H site, the buildings at the south end of the complex, for the county headquarter build-to-suit. Would be a LEED certified facility, and really the anchor of the county is what makes the project work for them. The next offer to discuss is that from Optima Ventures. Optima offered $16.25 million for the complex. Similarly, they suggested the rotunda to be a public use. They were more specific in suggesting at the onset that it could be a place for county council. The tower, some thoughts there were for hotel and or residential. Again, the Sweatland and 1010 building, office and residential, and the P&H buildings maintained as office. The proposal from Agnew Partners and Landmark Management was for $18.5 million. Some similar threads that you'll see running through here. Rotunda is public use. The tower is hotel or residential. The P&H building, a little bit different. They decided to convert a portion of it into a garage in order to service the balance of the complex. That was unique to their proposal. They were going to build to LEED standards, but not incur the cost of environmental certifications. So this is a quick summary of each of the offers that came in on the short list. And this is a summary of the scores that were assigned to each of the offers on the short list after further evaluation. As you can see, the Geis company's offer scored a 90. The Optima Ventures offer scored a 67, and the Agnew and Landmark offer scored a 75. Something that we think is important to note is that because of the way the Public Works team does their scoring process, we can't think of these in terms of letter grades like we often do when you see scoring out of 100. So 90 to 100 is not necessarily an A, although 90 was the highest score in this particular instance. Because they add and deduct points, really you have to see how the proposals all compare to one another in order to determine what is good and what is not your finalist or what is not shortlisted. So with that, we figured if the Geis proposal at Ameritrust was your top scoring offer for that particular property, and it was contingent upon the headquarters, and the landmark Agnew offer was your second highest scoring offer for the Ameritrust property, which was not contingent upon any other office deal, that we really had to investigate Initiative 1 in order to make a determination on Initiative 3. Basically, you couldn't sell Ameritrust to your highest scoring proposer unless you really determined that they were also your highest scoring headquarters proposer or not. So to give you an overview of Initiative 1, which was for the headquarters, the county embarked upon this process before we did any detailed research into the program, looking for a 225,000 square foot facility for their headquarters. We took into consideration new construction and purchase options. And really the goal of this, in addition to economics, we just want to stress again, was to assemble the functions into a single cohesive space. We were looking to foster collaboration, interaction between departments, a place where your constituents could go to get the services and the interaction that they needed. And below here, you also see the scoring point system for the Initiative 1 portion of the project. Again, it was out of 100 points, but we shifted the totals a bit. So some of the scoring criteria for Initiative 1, again, whoever was the proposing party was an important consideration, especially in the event that you would enter into a long-term agreement. Knowing that you had a landlord with a good proven track record was very important. The premises was an important consideration to the county. This had to be the right building. It had to have a very strong ground floor presence. You had to have options for space in the future. And the term of the offer, if it was a lease scenario, was also important. Not only knowing what your initial term was, but your options to stay in the building. As Ms. Connolly mentioned, this is a long-term decision. Even if you enter into a 20 to 26-year lease, this could be a 50-year or more decision for the county. Economics, again, it's a real estate transaction. No secret that economics would be the highest weighted category. Premises improvements, really talking about the space itself, how it would be improved from the base condition that would be provided by each of the landlords. We had a laundry list of building considerations and services that we evaluated. You see them all here, everything from janitorial services to mail service to the amenities of the neighborhood, the environmental certification of the property. These were all things that were evaluated in the selection committee. And then we had some other terms and conditions. Things that didn't seem to fit into the other categories but were still important in the county's evaluation. And you'll see as we move through this that there are some items on these lists that are noted as requirements versus others that are not. Important to note is that when we first met with the Public Works team and the executive team during the summer in order to develop this RFP, and we met with council as well to really refine it before we released it to the public, we determined that certain items had to be requirements for the county. Certain items we were willing to be flexible on, but we certainly had our preferences. So there are some items, for example, with Initiative 1, one of the requirements was that the administrative headquarters be in the central business district of downtown Cleveland. That was important to the county. So anything that was outside of that central business district wouldn't have been a consideration. It was a requirement. There are other things that were not necessarily requirements that the county wanted to remain flexible on. A good example would be refurbishment allowances. While we did ask for refurbishment allowances, we did not get them proposed by each offerer, but they were taken into account in economics and they were not necessarily a requirement of the transaction. So when we got in all of the initial proposals, we had to figure out how to analyze all of these offers. We had 9 properties proposed for the headquarters. We did on-site tours of each of the properties, roughly an hour each. We had a preliminary evaluation completed by URS. We had a preliminary space program completed by URS, and then we had a initial budget, which was also preliminary, developed by PCS. And we had to build an economic model for each of the options based upon those assumptions. Once that was done and we had the tours completed and the selection committee had reviewed all of the proposals, we sat down and we began our work. I'd like to turn it over for a moment to Marion Lash to talk a little bit about the space programming process.
When we began the space programming process, we first looked at the work that Allegro had done. And one of the things that they noted in their work was that their program was developed at a time when the county government was in a state of transition. So they indicated there were some things that we needed to circle back on and take a closer look at. The space program not only identifies the square footage that you need in the headquarters, it also needs to understand how you wanted the headquarters to work. Where do citizens come? What services they need? How do different county departments work together? So in order to understand that more fully, we had 23 interviews with the deputy chiefs, directors, and department heads to talk to them in detail about their staff counts today and in the future, their particular space requirements, their workflow, how they interacted with the public and what kind of interactions they had, as well as what other departments they worked with. The resulting program was really designed to emphasize citizen services, and we know that there are a number of services that really need to be on the ground floor of the headquarters because citizens walk in as they need them and they're looking for help and service immediately. We also identified other groups where citizens come in by appointment or local officials come in, and those were located in a different place at the building. One of the things that was important was to create a sense of flexibility. If you look back 20 years to how your buildings operated and how your departments were located and how people worked with you, it's very different than it is today. So we also had to look 20 years forward. One of the things that we know that makes buildings very flexible is to have more open plan and to have more standardized office sizes and workstation sizes. So we would make a big shift in the way that the county organizes its workspace and go from predominantly private offices to predominantly open space to give you the flexibility to have your departments change and grow over time. At the end of the study, we found a slight reduction in headcount from the Allegro study, a slight reduction in square feet per person, and overall a reduction in the square footage of the headquarters. There were our major goals were to create a service-focused environment. We're looking at efficiency in the way citizens use the building, in the way employees work and become productive, and in the way the facility is operated. We know that a sense of transparency is very important for the government to create a positive identity and to inspire confidence in the government. And finally, we know that collaboration with citizens, with government officials, and within the departments was important. So we looked for all these things. When we talk about citizens, we talked about one-stop shopping, and a lot of our departments gave us suggestions on how they would like that to work. We also looked at how you could use technology to support the citizen interaction, and we have an example here from the Board of Revision where people are coming in and waiting for meetings, and we looked at ways to make that time more comfortable and productive for them. With the workplace, we really want to enhance the productivity of the county employees, create opportunities for them to work together more efficiently, and to create environments that will flex as departments change and evolve over time and the way they do their work evolves. And finally, we wanted the facility itself to be cost-effective to operate. And here's an example of a conference room that can be set up in a number of different ways depending what the business of the day is. These were the occupants that were identified for the headquarters. There's quite a wide range of government groups. One group that we interviewed, the Veteran Service Commission, was later recommended not to be included in the headquarters, but all these other groups will be there.
So, when we were building our preliminary models, we built off of the work completed by URS for the program that we rounded to 205,000 usable square feet. And we set up a series of assumptions because for the preliminary estimations, we had not yet completed fit plans at every single property. We had to do our best to apply a uniform set of assumptions just so we could get to a short list, because that 9 proposal amount was a pretty hefty amount for the amount of work to be done. 205,000 usable square feet, and based upon our experiences and standards in the industry, we estimated that new construction would potentially be 10% smaller than that. Based upon efficiencies, historic construction would potentially be 10% larger. We applied the building factors as proposed by the landlords to convert whatever usable number was in our model to a rentable number. And then we really followed the proposal. We took the rents and rent abatements as proposed by the landlords, built them into the model, each of our models being a window over time over a 20-year period, showing per year what the cost was for each different line item. Rent, Construction, so we used a uniform cost for the tenant improvements and the refurbishments. We used uniform relocation costs per square foot for each of the options because the county obviously has to fund a relocation into each facility. We applied any allowances being given and proposed by the landlords for construction, relocation, refurbishment, and even brokerage against all of the costs on the front end. At the brokerage side of things, a number of the proposers said that they would offer a brokerage fee, but as you know, because of our agreement with the county, that was not coming to us. That was actually being credited in the transaction against other costs. Utilities were modeled uniformly per square foot based upon what utilities the county was responsible for. In some buildings, you'd be responsible for just your overhead lights and the wall plugs. In other buildings, you might be responsible for all utilities, including gas, water, sewer, and so forth. For costs that were not fixed in the proposal from each landlord, we assume a 2.5% annual escalation. I think it's easy for everybody to understand that over a 20-year period of time, due to inflation and other reasons, costs are bound to change. We have to assume some sort of escalation in these costs over time if they are not fixed or controlled by the landlord. And then we did incorporate premium pricing for any contingent property offers as a credit. So as we've already noted, the Geis offer, which was contingent, their offer for Ameritrust, which was contingent upon the headquarters, certainly represented a premium price over the next highest scored offer, which was from Agnew and Landmark. So we want to go quickly but comprehensively through the offers that we did receive in that initial round. As we said, we received 9 different offers. This is a little overview map of the downtown area showing where each of the offers is located, or I'm sorry, where each of the buildings is located, and we'll go through them one by one here. The first offer was for a build-to-suit at the Ameritrust complex. The offer was made by the Geis companies, and I won't get you bored into the detail of the offer, but it received a score of 67 at the first scoring committee meeting, and it was shortlisted. The offer from 45 Erieview, which is commonly known as the AT&T building over at East 9th and Lakeside, was also shortlisted with a score of 72 points. This happened to be our highest scoring proposal during that first scoring committee. The tower at Erieview was scored a 55 based upon the selection committee's criteria, and it was not shortlisted. It was removed from consideration. The Halle building over in Playhouse Square was scored a 56, also not as high as some of the other offers, so it was not shortlisted and it was removed from consideration. This particular offer was different than the others in that it was the only offer that the county received that was a pure purchase offer. It was an upfront purchase of the Halle building in total, plus the garage adjacent, and it was deemed that there were enough costs to renovate and refurbish the building that really added on to that initial reasonable purchase price. Eaton Center scored a 59 and was not as high as some of the other offers. Over at East 12th and Superior, as many of you are aware, Eaton Corporation is going to be relocating into the suburbs, and the upper portion of this building is available. It was removed from consideration. The 925 building, what we commonly and historically refer to as the Huntington building, has now been rebranded as the 925 building. Proposed the portion of the building that was, or most of the portion of the building that was occupied at one time by Huntington Bank, received a score of 64 points, and it was shortlisted. The Standard building at the corner of Ontario and St. Clair received a score of 47 and was removed from consideration. We received 2 offers from the Weston Company, or what I should say Weston Inc. Both offers were for either totally new construction or partially new construction. The first here is an expansion that they proposed of the Marion building, a property that the county happens to be selling in the warehouse district. This first offer was to renovate the Marion building and then build an adjacent, not quite a twin building, but an adjacent building that would be connected on the ground floor and could be the entire complex for the county's headquarters. It scored a 60 and was removed from consideration. The second offer from Weston was for a total build-to-suit at the south end of that same block, what is currently a parking lot today at the corner of West 3rd and St. Clair. This particular proposal scored a 63 and was also shortlisted. So just to recap, with the 9 offers that were received for the headquarters, we did shortlist 4 for further investigation: a build-to-suit on the site of the Ameritrust complex, 45 Erieview building, the 925 building, and a build-to-suit in the warehouse district. And we unfortunately removed from consideration 5 other buildings that did not score as high. So now we're going to get into that short list of proposals that we received and reviewed. So the short list of proposals had a deeper dive, so to speak, and analysis. We had a second scoring committee that met to score the offers from the shortlisted buildings once some research was done. But prior to those meetings, we did a little bit more work. First thing we did was we had other on-site tours and landlord presentations, not only with the county selection committee, but also with county council and executive staff. These were about 50 minutes each again. And the URS team did a much more thorough and deeper dive on an architectural and engineering basis of all of the shortlisted options. I don't know if you want to.
Sure. In addition, we received CAD drawings from each of the landlords. We field verified the drawings to make sure they were up to date and correct. We met with the building managers and engineers. We walked every floor in the building that was offered to the county, as well as having conversations with the building managers about the existing systems and their conditions. We looked at mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire, elevator systems. On the build-to-suit options, we met with the development team as their architects, looking at their plans for their buildings. We test fit the county program uniformly to each building. And based on that test fit, PCS did a detailed cost estimate of each layout. And we also used the conditions that were part of the original RFP, Attachment C, that described certain requirements of the county. And then finally, we asked each landlord to confirm the usable square footage and the rentable square footage in each option.
So once that work was completed and the selection committee had the opportunity, I want to say that we have interchanged on this slide the terms selection committee and scoring committee. But I should say it's a selection committee and a scoring meeting or scoring session. The selection committee was able to review all of the information provided by URS and PCS, was able to review financial modeling of options that was completed by CBRE, and they were able to review any revisions that were made to the shortlisted offers. Revisions and improvements were allowed during this period based upon feedback from the county and CBRE. So we'd like to share with you some of the further detail on the 4 shortlisted options and what their ultimate proposal ended up looking like, in addition to the work that was completed by URS and PCS during that period of time.
45 Erieview is at 9th and Lakeside. It's a building that was constructed in 1983. It remains well maintained. In addition to that, they offered a parking garage that is approximately a block away from the property. This building was built as a corporate headquarters for Ohio Bell. We prepared a floor plan for each and every building in the matter of time. I will not share them all with you this evening. This is the ground floor plan. And what's of interest is that there are 2 elevator banks in the building. This one would be used by the upper floor tenants, and then by passing through security, this bank of elevators would be used by the county. Those who wish to do counter transactions would come into this area. They could also enter directly from 9th Street and come through security here. In addition, on the first floor, there's this space over here, which is outside of security. It's a good location for the Auto Title Bureau, very convenient for people to come in and use that. This is an example of one of the upper floors. You can see that it has a rounded facade. Kind of had a little impact on the efficiency of the layout, but not a serious one. This is an example of 2 departments that were laid out, and you can see that this lower group, which represents the IT department, is very efficiently laid out with workstations. And up here, you can start to see that we had a little bit of extra space remaining with this department because of the curvature. To give you a quick summary of what our findings were, the county would take up 50% of this building. They were offered naming rights on the building, so there was an opportunity for them to establish their identity there. There are 9 floors contiguous that are available to the county with an exclusive elevator bank. It had a pretty large floor plate, rather efficient. There's glass on almost the majority of the facade, which means that the spaces are bright and well lit. And the other thing we noted in this is it was the smallest ground floor of all the shortlisted buildings. And we also needed to use parts of the 2nd floor, the 3rd floor, and the 4th floor for public interaction.
So the offer that was made by 45 Erieview was for effectively the lower half of the building. The layout that we did not contemplate taking the entire lower level or the entire 1st floor, as you saw in the drawing Marianne just showed, but it did contemplate taking a significant portion of space on those floors, plus effectively the entirety of floors 2 through 9. The average annual base rent proposed here was very, very aggressive. The average over a 20-year period was for just shy of $17 per square foot. That was the average. They offered not only a year and a half of rent abatement, 1 year at the front end and 6 months about halfway through the term, but they also offered a brokerage credit, which again was applied to the county's costs in the transaction. And just so you know, we will be getting into a little bit more detail on the economics, but we wanted to give you some overview of each of the buildings first. The building offered a $50 tenant improvement allowance, which was applied $50 per square foot, which is how improvement allowances are often quoted in our market. They did not offer any refurbishment, but the one thing that they did offer, which was very interesting for this particular proposal, was that they were going to deed over the parking garage that they owned, has roughly 250 parking spaces at the corner of 12th and Lakeside. They were going to deed it over to the county at the onset of this proposal. Now, there are certainly costs to maintaining a garage and owning a garage, but certainly having a garage handed to you is interesting, albeit the size was a little bit smaller than you ideally would like. When evaluating the revised and improved proposal from 45 Erieview, the score actually ended up being a 69, whereas before you may have seen it a little bit higher. One of the key drivers of that was that once we got into the actual fit planning process here at 45 Erieview, we unfortunately realized that you would need more space in this building than the initial estimates would have indicated. And additionally, the ground floor was not nearly as large as we would have thought when walking in on day one. Once we did an actual layout, we realized that it happened to be one of your smaller, if not the smallest, ground floor presence, which was something we were truly trying to maximize at each of the options. It did, though, have, as a very big pro in terms of the pros and cons, it was on the low range of your annual cost. This was an inexpensive offer. It was very, very aggressive. And they were deeding over the parking garage, which was a very interesting twist on their proposal. Unfortunately, again, parking garage is unattached, smaller ground floor. They did require some more square footage than we had anticipated once we did the actual layout. And it did end up being the lower half of a 2-tenant building. Really what the county seemed to have a preference for was strong identity, not having to intermingle with a great number of other tenants in a property if at all possible, and that just wasn't totally possible here. The next proposal to discuss was the shortlisted offer from the Weston Inc. group for their build-to-suit in the warehouse district. You'll notice that this rendering is a touch different than what they had initially shown in their first offer in September, but I'd like to have Marianne talk a little bit about that one as well.
Sure. This building, the county would occupy 11 floors. It's a little bit smaller footprint, so they need more floors to do it. There is attached parking, which is directly here, so that you could come into the building via the parking garage to the elevator core, or you could come in directly from the street. We have the counters are located here, very convenient for citizens, along with some first floor activities that we require, some showers, some storage, some other functionality. We had a little room left over. We were able to find a small department, regional collaboration that would take up the remaining space on the first floor. This is an upper floor. You can see how very efficient it is in its layout. This would be the Public Works Department, but it fills the floor completely. What we liked about this building is the identity is exclusive to the county. It would be your dedicated headquarters. New construction. The landlord offered an additional floor for expansion with a 3-year, it would be available to you for the first 3 years of the lease. It was the smallest floor plate of all. There were glass facades on 3 sides of the lower floor and all 4 facades above. In addition, the building had a series of green terraces that not only add to its attraction, but allow spaces for people to step outside with the parking garage directly attached. And we have, in addition to the ground floor, we had public access functions on the 2nd, 4th, and 5th floor.
So the meat of the offer from the Weston Inc. group was for a 244,000 square foot space, which was ultimately the square footage of all of the floors. They had a few really good concessions. There were 3 months of abated rent at the beginning, a very healthy credit for brokerage that was applied on the front end, and a relocation allowance that was applied in the front end. They also offered the highest per square foot improvement allowance of any of the offers that were made. The minimum requirement was for $50 per square foot. The Weston Group came out actually in their initial offer and offered $56, and they did refurbish they did propose some refurbishment allowance, $8 per square foot at one time during the term. When scored, primarily economics were the toughest thing with this particular proposal. It did have low out-of-pocket costs. They did have healthy allowances, and it was going to be new construction and a nice LEED certified building. Unfortunately, it was high overall cost, and this is pretty much what we would expect, what would be pretty typical out of new construction, new Class A construction in the Midwest. Being at the higher end of costs, even though you will get some efficiencies because of square footage, really can drive you to be at the higher end, which is what we saw here. Unfortunately, this, like any new construction option, potentially has delayed occupancy for a few months. We don't know that to be the case, but we have to consider that in our evaluation. It had a small parking lot that was attached, and it did have smaller floor plates than many of the buildings that were considered. Next property that was proposed and shortlisted was the 925 building, the historic Huntington building, and I'll turn it over to Marianne again.
So I think, this is a very beautiful historic building in downtown Cleveland. It is still one of the largest banking halls that was ever built, and it has a lot of beautiful historic detailing and features. This is the largest ground floor of any that we test fit. It's a significant amount of space. We're able to occupy and place a lot of the citizen services on this floor. On the other hand, we also have filled this vast banking hall with workstations in order to accommodate that and create the location for that. There are areas of the building, of the first floor, that are not easy to use. We have entrances here from Chester, from East 9th, and this remaining banking hall, which the landlord suggested they would make a public indoor open space. And in order to allow that circulation to work, we've placed our security over here. We also have a second security point here, right above the dedicated elevator bank for the county floors. In addition, one of the beautiful features is a large monumental staircase that's located in this area. The second floor is a mezzanine floor with a single loaded corridor all the way around the atrium. Very beautiful, allows people to really see the gorgeous building. It creates some inefficiencies because it is a single loaded corridor, and in many cases, we have a second corridor inside the departments. So we're finding that this is a little bit inefficient. One of the big advantages of it is that, again, the remaining services that might be used by citizens are located on one floor, and I think for orientation purposes, it's easy for them to find what they need. In addition, there's an annex to this building, and on the second floor, it was a very good fit for a conference center, and the conference center being located kind of a little bit off the grid within the county building, I think makes it easier for people to go there and have their meetings and come back. When we looked at the summary of this, one of the concerns we had is the shared tenancy. The county is really going to only occupy about 20% of the facility. That makes it a little bit challenging to establish an identity. The landlord had offered a dedicated signed entrance on Chester that would be for the county with a lay-by that would make it very convenient for you to drop people off. We were able to get 5 contiguous floors. There are a significant number of dedicated elevators and staircases within those 5 floors that would make it easy for people to move back and forth between it. We had a partial tenancy on the 5th floor. We did not need all this square footage that was available there. And we were also able to place some service functions and then the auto title department in the retail space that was on the lower level. The very large floor plate, I think, had both a lot of advantages and disadvantages to us, and there's no doubting the beautiful character of this building that would give the county a very distinct identity within it. So we used a little bit of the ground floor, the 2nd floor, and some of the lower level for the key public interactions.
So the points of this transaction, roughly a 265,200 square foot premises, all in all, between the spaces from the lower level up to the 5th floor. Average annual rent over the 20-year term of just over $21 a foot. The landlord did provide a relocation allowance. They did provide an increased tenant improvement allowance. And one of the things that they did during the course of October and November really enhanced their investment in the property through the refurbishment allowance. Every 5 years, they were going to be contributing an additional $5 per square foot towards any refurbishment the county might need to do in the space. So in the evaluation, once we went through with the scoring committee, we took into account the fact that the building owned by Optima Ventures has no debt. It has a wonderful grand space on the ground and lower levels. It has a large floor plate in the banking atrium, and really being at Euclid and 9th and in a historic building is a good location in our city and has a great civic feel. Some of the cons, unfortunately, were that the way that the building is laid out, as Marion had indicated, require more square footage overall than some of your options. That ground floor with the single loaded corridors on 2 and 3 that overlook the atrium really don't make for as efficient of a plan as we had thought. In fact, at one time we had considered leaving that ground floor atrium empty to preserve a concierge or an entry and a really grand entrance, and we realized that we could conserve 25 to 30,000 square feet in our plan by filling it with workstations and cubicles. The shared tenancy and the main entrance being on Chester were a little less than desirable as well. But this overall achieved what is a very good score in this process with a 72. I apologize for that line. I don't know why that's there. The last offer to consider was from the Geis companies for a build-to-suit at the Ameritrust site that was shifted from the original offer on the Optima garage site to where the P&H buildings are located today over the course of their revisions to their proposal in October, November.
Okay. In this case, the ground floor has an entrance at the corner of 9th and Prospect where you could come directly into the building and through security. The transaction counters are right here, very easy to get to, and the other functions of Treasury and Tax Department are here. Up in this area, we had to create some of the building operations, the loading areas, the mail department, and some dedicated parking. This is an example of the 4th floor, and what's unique about this building and no other is the skyway that attaches directly to the Ameritrust garage across the street. It basically creates a second entrance and a second opportunity to capture citizens as they come into the building. We located the Office of Procurement and Diversity on this floor for people dropping off bids. They can very quickly get in and out of the building. We are also going to locate the council chambers on this floor, and another use that could be on this floor would be the conference center. This is one of the upper floors again, and you can see it's very efficient layout. Again, the IT department is one that seems to fit well in these buildings. And we had room for 2 much smaller departments off to the side. This identity would be exclusive to the county. It's new construction, 8th floor are proposed. We have quite a bit of glass on 3 facades, but on the north facade, we're limited to the amount of glass that we can provide because of the proximity to existing buildings by fire regulations. And it has the convenience of the parking directly accessible through the Skyway. It has the second largest ground floor, plus the 4th floor direct access create a very nice opportunity for public access. And we've also located some additional public functions on the 2nd floor.
Some of the basic points of the transaction were that the premises proposed were about 222,000 rentable square feet. This is the smallest and most efficient of the options that are on the table. It does, however, have one of the higher average base rents per square foot. So again, this is an example of how you offset the efficiency of new construction with what can be the cost. What we found here was interesting was that this particular building was not charging a cost that would be what we would typically expect to see for new construction, which would have an average much closer to a $40 per square foot number. When you added up the base rent plus the service rent for operating expenses, you were closer to an average of just over $30 a foot. There was a 12-month discount at the front end in the rent, about a 2/3 discount during that year, a tenant improvement allowance of $50 per square foot, and no refurbishment allowance proposed here. You would be attached to the parking garages across the street, depending on the final plan. And one of the things that really impacted how we looked at this, actually 2 of the things that impacted how we looked at this were, 1, the premium pricing that was offered for Ameritrust. Certainly, that's a function of the developer who's making the proposal having an anchor tenant in tow. Number 2, the fact that this revised offer, in order to create the best economics, was a 26-year term. This was a longer term than each of the options proposed, but what it did result in was a transfer of ownership of the property to the county at the end of the term for $1. So that was a pretty meaningful and impactful portion of the proposal, that at the end of 26 years, you would have the option to say, for $1, we'd like to own our headquarters again, and cut off rent expenses going into the future. When reviewing in the scoring, this property scored a 77. It was the highest scoring offer that was on the table. Some of the pros to the offer were that it was a new building, very efficient, certainly had a good ground floor, not your largest, but the second largest, and it would be a LEED Silver environmentally friendly complex that you would own potentially after a 26-year lease. There's premium pricing for one of your property sales, and you would have the identity on East 9th that would really be appealing to the county. There were a couple of cons as well. There isn't a great opportunity for contraction in this new construction option, and much like the Weston Inc. proposal, you have to assume that with new construction, there might be a delay in occupancy at some point by a few months. So when we evaluated the proposals on the short list, we had to refine our economic assumptions. And we didn't change them as much as we refined them with the research that was completed primarily by the URS and PCS teams. First thing that we did, instead of assuming a square footage based upon the program and industry norms, we actually determined the square footage because of the layouts that were completed by URS. Each of those layouts, a polyline, was delivered to the landlords, and the square footages were confirmed by the landlords. The landlords either confirmed, here's what my rentable square footage for that space would be, or they confirmed, I agree with your usable, go ahead and apply the building factor in my proposal to determine the rentable. We still in our models showed the rents and the rent abatements as quoted by the landlord for the first 20 years. For the Ameritrust offer, we had to work with the 26-year window. Escalations, again, were at 2.5% annually, and many of the points here really model what we had in the initial offer, the initial review and modeling, with the exception of the construction cost estimates, which were actually completed by PCS based upon the fit plans that were done by URS. URS took a uniform program and applied it to each of the buildings, and PCS took that program and those layouts with uniform assumptions as to materials and certain considerations, and they figured out a cost structure for each property. So I'd like to, again, have Marion talk to you a little bit about the test fitting process itself.
I just want to take a minute to talk about the kinds of square footages we use. It's very technical and precise definitions that are developed by BOMA, which is the Building Owners and Managers Association. The programs that we developed were calculated. We worked with each department, figured out how many square feet they needed is for offices, workstations, conference rooms, and other spaces. That's multiplied by a circulation factor. The test fit usable square footage is measured. After we have laid out every floor of the building according to the program, we measure it from the inside face of the glass, if it's a predominantly glass facade, or the inside face of the wall. We also exclude certain spaces from that measurement. The rentable square footage is calculated again. The usable is multiplied by a factor that the landlord determines, but it represents the tenant's share of the building spaces that are used by all the building tenants. One of the things that I think is was important as we did these calculations, when you have a single tenant, almost all the corridors in the building become usable. When you have multi-tenants on a floor, there's quarters that everybody shares. And so that had some subtle impact in the numbers. Just to talk to you quickly about our test fit process, we used the same program and applied it to each and every building and tried to do the best layout we could based on not only the square footages and the adjacencies, but also providing easy access to the citizens. We tried to develop the best and lowest cost solutions for each building. Whenever we had questions for the landlords, we referred them through CBRE. It may have been questions about the mechanical systems or about some of the spaces. As Ryan mentioned, we used the P-lines to determine that we were all on the same page about measurements. The test fit cost estimates, we had developed our assumptions early in the process about what the level of finish would be for the administrative headquarters, and we provided those details to PCS so that we were all using the same kind of estimates for each one. And we do note that the cost estimates did not include furniture, equipment such as computers, security stations, or technology that the county would need. We do also note that as the design proceeds, there are additional opportunities for value engineering in the process. And finally, we had some conclusions as our cost estimates were completed. In general, the new construction build-to-suits had more efficient layouts because the floor plates were more compatible with modern office layouts. West St. Clair, the Weston group, had a smaller floor plate and required more floors, which meant that we were duplicating core and common elements across more floors. The Geis proposal was a larger building, but we lost some efficiency with double lobbies on the first and fourth floor. Both buildings had two-story atriums that extended into the second floor. And then, as I mentioned, the limited glass on the north side of the P&H buildings lost some flexibility because we tried not to locate workplace against the dark alleys. And then with the existing buildings, it was interesting because both of them were designed originally as corporate headquarters. And so we found that they had some iconic imagery and detailing that did not necessarily support efficiency, but really added a lot of character to the building. We also noted that the multi-tenant buildings could provide a little bit more flexibility and expansion and contraction. If you're the sole tenant of the building and you need more or less space, you will probably not get much cooperation from the landlord. But in the case of some of the floors in each of the other buildings, we were able to take what we needed on the first floor or the lower levels. And then there's just a note, on 45 Erieview, we had multi-tenant floors on lower level in 1, but they required the county to take the full extent of floors 2 through 9. In the 925 building, we had multi-tenant floors on the lower level 1 and 5. And then finally, we wanted to note again that our goal was to minimize the footprint in the banking lobby, but we still needed to create a significant amount of program there in order to satisfy. And just for your visual comparison, these are to scale each of the 4 footprints, and you can see quite easily what the square footage available on each floor was for the county. Again, 45 Erieview was the smallest with just over 14,000 square feet. Then Weston, a little bit larger. The Ameritrust build-to-suit came in about 17,000, and 925 is at 38,000.
So, pardon me. In our review and analysis of each of the shortlisted proposals, we had to determine how to build the economic models of each of the options, because economics was your most heavily weighted category in the scoring. And that was one of the primary reasons that we were engaged. The rentable square footages for each of the options is shown here, based upon the work that Marion Lash just described. So you've got, ranging at the smallest, at the Ameritrust build-to-suit at 222,000 square feet, to what was the largest rentable square footage at 45 Erieview at 271,000 square feet. Base rent would be the next line item in the model that we build. So the rents that we modeled were shown as they were quoted by the landlords. Rents are typically quoted on a per rentable square foot basis. And in some of the properties, some portions of the premises were quoted at reduced rents. At 45 Erieview, at the Warehouse District build-to-suit, and at the 925 building, there were portions of the property that were quoted at what you might call storage rents, based upon the fact that they were lower level or windowless or less desirable. Where the facility was actually being used for storage, which occurred at the Warehouse District build-to-suit and at the 925 building, or at 45 Erieview, where, for example, the 3rd floor was quoted at a storage rent because it was windowless, we applied that discounted rent in each of our models to that proportion of the square footage, and we blended it together with the full rent being paid on the balance of the square footage. So that actually meant that for these 3 buildings, we gave them the credit of a slightly lower blended rent based upon how much of the space was storage or windowless versus how much was your traditional, typical windowed office space. We escalated the rents as it was shown in each of the proposals for each of the options, and any abatements that were offered in each of the buildings we applied as a credit at the appropriate time. So 45 Erieview offered 18 months free, and we credited that as a year of free rent at the beginning and 6 months of free rent in year 11. And at the Ameritrust build-to-suit, we had the initial 12-month discount, which was roughly a 2/3 discount on the rent during the first year. When you take that into account, the base rents at each of the buildings amount to these numbers that you see here. And again, in an effort to be thorough but not bore you too much, we won't go through every single number, but you've got them here in front of you, and these will be available. But it's important to note that the base rent at 45 Erieview came in as the lowest, even though it was the largest square footage. That just shows you what an aggressive offer they made. The build-to-suit in the Warehouse District was the highest. Not a huge surprise, considering that it was Class A new construction, really what we'd expect. And the build-to-suit at Ameritrust shows being a low number, but there's a reason for that. It's because their rent was broken into 2 parts. And you'll see the second part of that rent come into play in the next line item. So this portion of the rent really only applies to that which is servicing their development debt. But as you can see here at the bottom, you've got a range just on the base rents of everywhere from $85 million to $196 million over the first 20 years. We will at the end reconcile this with the additional term at Ameritrust as well. When we look at expenses and escalations at each property, it's handled differently by different properties, although 3 of the 4 on the short list handled expense escalations as you would typically expect for a downtown office building. Most buildings in our market are what we would term potentially full service, that there are operating expenses included within the rent during the first year, and any increases in those expenses are paid by the tenant. They are passed on through. The average for Cleveland during the last 20 or so years has been roughly 2.32%. The national average has been just over 2.6%. In our models, we apply a 2.5% annual escalation to everything in order to be uniform. For the Ameritrust build-to-suit, they did not propose it in the same manner. They had a separate rent item. They had a separate rent called service rent that accounted for these costs. and they fixed their increases at 2% annually in their proposal. In addition, we had to factor in the cost of insurance at the Ameritrust build-to-suit. A portion of that is being borne by the county. And we had to take into account real estate tax exemptions. Based upon advice from the county legal counsel, the outside county legal counsel that was engaged, you would have a potential for real estate tax exemptions at any of the scenarios. But really, the Ameritrust build-to-suit was the only one where they felt very confident because it would be a publicly owned, publicly used, sole tenant space. Everything else had potential issues with being private ownership, mixed multi-tenant scenarios, and shared spaces within the building. So when we took these estimates into account, and I should say that we used what the landlords gave us as their estimates of these expenses when we built our models. Here's the additional add to each of the models. As you can see, 45 Erieview and the Warehouse District build-to-suit had one of the larger estimates over the 20-year period of how your expenses might escalate. The 925 building was the lowest, simply because they've got a very low starting base year. And at the Ameritrust build-to-suit, this is how we reconcile the fact that their base rent is only $91 million. When you add up the 91 plus the 43, you really get the base rent plus the service rent, and that $135 million total is reflective of what the county would pay during the first 20-year period. So at this point, we are in a range of roughly $98 million for 45 Erieview, again going through 120, 135, and almost $212 million for the Warehouse District build-to-suit. Next to take into account were the utilities. We had to apply a uniform assumption for utilities as well because they were not handled uniformly at each building. For 3 of the buildings, the county would be responsible for their overhead lights and base plugs. We modeled this at a $1 per square foot cost, and much like the expenses, we escalated it at 2.5% every year. We assume that utilities in 2034 probably won't cost the same as they do today. For the Ameritrust build-to-suit, though, we had to model a higher number per square foot for utilities, although we did give it the benefit of being an energy-efficient, LEED-certified new construction building. So the HVAC systems and the cooling system, or the cooling, the HVAC, would all be assumed to be very efficient. But we used a $2.25 per square foot number at that particular building because the county would be paying for all utilities, not just their lights and base plugs. When you add in the utility considerations, 45 Erieview, Warehouse District build-to-suit, the 925 building, all very similar amounts. The Ameritrust build-to-suit does have a higher amount simply because of the fact that you do have, those additional utilities you pay for on top of your rent.
When we looked at the cost estimates across all the shortlisted, we found that in general, the new construction priced out a little bit higher, and I think that had to do with building in contingencies because we had less available information about the buildings. There were still some unknowns that we had to compensate for in the further design, development, construction, and schedule. And in addition, in new construction, any of the utilities that are the tenant responsibility are extended fully from the core. So that you have to extend your own mechanical systems via V-boxes technology. The renovation generally priced out a little bit lower because we knew a lot more about those buildings. We could walk through them, we could talk to the managers, we could understand what was there. We also thought that there might be some potential to reuse some portions of the existing infrastructure that were built by other tenants. We're very conservative about it, but we knew that to be the case. We also had to assume that there might be higher costs for working in a historic building due to the age of the building, some unique materials and conditions, and the kind of unknowns that you discover during renovation.
So when we built our model of the revised shortlist proposals, we gave the construction estimates as were provided by URS and PCS based upon their work, and we applied the allowances being given to us by each of the landlords as a credit in the initial year of the deal. For areas where there are storage rents being charged, small portions of the lower levels, or that third floor at 45 Erieview, those spaces were being proposed with reduced economics but no allowance. So for those areas, we do not factor in an allowance. When you take into account the cost of construction and the construction allowance itself, these are the net amounts. You find that you have a pretty consistent cost, 45 Erieview and Warehouse District. The 925 building, being a little bit larger and historic property, has a slightly higher construction cost, although on a per square foot basis, pretty comparable to some of the other options. And the Ameritrust build-to-suit comes in, again, comparable to 45 Erieview and the Warehouse District build-to-suit. And the allowances shown as credits are all, applied as proposed by the landlords. There were a few other allowances and costs that we built into the model. Really quickly, we did want to take into account and give credit to any of the landlords that offered a refurbishment allowance, because we realize and we recognize that over time, the county will incur costs to touch up paint, replace carpet, do minor renovations here and there in the facility, and especially over a 20-year period, and the fact that the county is a living, breathing entity, you see those changes happening pretty often. So we estimated each of those refurbishment periods every 5 years at about $8 a foot. And we applied any allowances given to us by the landlords as a credit in the year they were offered. Relocation estimates were a uniform $5 per square foot estimate, and any allowances were applied as a credit against that. And any brokerage fees that were offered are applied as a year one credit to the county in the transaction. So this is the result of adding in those line items to get closer to your total. 45 Erieview, still your least expensive option at this point at about $115 million. Warehouse District build-to-suit, $223 million. The 925 building, $135. The Ameritrust build-to-suit, just about $160. Lastly, the real estate transfers were something that we had to take into account. Number one, Geis had offered to hand you the building for $1 at the end of a 26-year lease at a price that was $8.5 million higher than the next highest offer that presumably you could have been accepting. And in addition, 45 Erieview handed you a parking garage at commencement, which theoretically you could have turned around and sold and taken in and recouped the cash for on the front end of the lease if you chose to, or you could just hold on to it and maintain it and retain it. We had to apply some sort of calculation to these upfront benefits to the county. So we applied the $8.5 million premium price as a credit to the transaction in the Ameritrust site. We applied a $3.5 million credit on the front end for the parking garage under the assumption that you could have chosen to sell it. And then we had to think up a way to value the building on the Ameritrust site that you would be potentially handed at the end of year 26. Very hard to have a crystal ball and tell you what the comparables will be in year 26, but we can tell you based upon the proposals that we received from each of these offerers what the estimate of market rents would be, because we had 9 total and 4 shortlisted offers that gave us a sense of what market rents would be. And we know how real estate values have changed in Cleveland over the last 20 years. So we were able to establish a very wide range. We wanted to make sure to cast a wide net on this. And we assumed that in 26 years, that property could be anywhere from $18 to $55 million of value. That if it was transferred to you for $1, you could potentially turn around and sell it at market value and continue leasing. Because at each of the other options, you would still be leasing and be a tenant. We used the midpoint of that range, roughly $36.5 million, and applied it as a credit to the transaction. We did not do this, though, without realizing that there are costs to that benefit. You do have a requirement in that scenario to lease for an additional 6-year period, years 21 through 26. And because it's new construction and because costs escalate over time, there is additional pricing during the latter portion of the Ameritrust build-to-suit offer. What you might call premium pricing over what market rates would be. So in year 21, what you'd be paying per square foot at the Geis building is likely to be higher than what you'd be paying in the first renewal year at any other building. So we had to make an estimate as to what the premium cost would be to be in that Geis building for those additional 6 years. We took into account the rent and the expense premium. We took into account an additional year of refurbishment cost. Took into account those utilities because you would still be paying for all of your utilities here, whereas in any other scenario where you would still be leasing, you'd only pay for your lights and your plugs. And we took into account that additional bit of insurance premium that would be factored in that you would have to continue paying during that period. Those additional costs are roughly $18.3 million during that period of time, over and above what we can expect you'd be paying in any other facility if you were to choose any of your other shortlisted options or go to another building at market rates and be paying rent there. So we charged $18.3 million to the project. So when we took all of this into account, pardon me, we come up with this complete table. This shows you how we built our model, line item by line item, rent, expenses, utilities, construction, relocation, everything that really went into it. The real estate transfers is not something we see in every transaction. It's not all the time that you see very significant, meaningful premium pricing and minimal cost real estate transfers in a project, but that's what you had here, and we had to take it into consideration. One of the things that we looked at in the selection committee too, which I want to make sure that we talk about here, is the fact that the total cost is not necessarily a perfect reflection of what your costs are in today's dollars. When you look at a transaction over a long period of time, 20 to 26 years in this instance, we like to use what's called a net present value calculation. This shows you what the equivalent is of, and I'll use 45 Erieview as an example, $112 million over 20 years. We like to figure out what's the equivalent of that in today's dollars. If you were to pay for that all today, and you were to discount the fact that $1 in 2034 isn't as expensive as $1 in 2014. And that's what this calculation is meant to account for. What would that net present value be? And so while we looked at all the costs of the transactions, the selection committee also looked at the net present value costs of each of the transactions. So roughly a $60 million cost in today's dollars to do the 45 Erieview transaction, a $114 million cost to do the build-to-suit in the warehouse district, a $73 million present day value cost to do the transaction in the 925 building, and roughly a $71 million cost to do the transaction in the Ameritrust build-to-suit. When the scoring occurred during that second meeting, we, again, and you've seen some of these scores, but we scored the Ameritrust build-to-suit the highest at 77, 925 building at 72, 45 Erieview, albeit your least expensive option, was a 69, and the warehouse district build-to-suit was a 65. Really what you see when you compare these scores is that this did take into account economics, which was important, but this also took into account the fact that you had to be in the right building. And what we've told you, and you've heard me say a number of times, and you're probably getting bored of it, is that I want to reiterate each of the offers that were shortlisted. In fact, all the offers made, it's not easy to put together a proposal. And the 9 offers that were received were well thought out and really made by quality groups. The 4 that were shortlisted especially were representative of very hard work on the part of each of the proposers, an analysis of the county's needs, and an attempt to make sure that their building was not only economically but also physically the right facility for you. It wasn't all about economics. It also had to be the right building and the right transaction for the county, which you see reflective in the scoring committee results. But I like to make that acknowledgement now, because while they did it in different ways, each of these proposers really did a heck of a job to earn your business. So once we had done that scoring and we realized that the proposal from the Geis companies was the highest scoring proposal for the headquarters as well, we realized that this would ultimately be the recommendation that the committee made to the executive, and that the executive and his consultants carried forward to council back in December. These are some renderings of the property as prepared by the Geis companies. You can see a couple of different renderings of what the facade of the building might look like, and an aerial shot giving you a really distant look at the rooftop terrace. This is a zoom in, a little close up on that rooftop terrace overlooking one of my favorite places in the city, Jacobs Field. I'm sorry, Progressive Field. I did that on purpose. This is a look at the ground floor of the building. This is a rendering that was prepared by URS. Certainly, we are very early in any design development process. And how the building ultimately looks, all the way from the exact layout to the color palette, will be a matter of long discussions and a large process and project. This is a rendering of the 4th floor. This is where the bridge would potentially come over from that Ameritrust garage and create a second lobby area. Little press room you can see in the back. There's a gentleman with a camera, and this would be another floor for the public to interact. So some basic high-level points about the proposal and why it was scored the way that it was. It was the highest purchase price offered for Ameritrust with an $8.5 million premium. I think it's interesting to note that when the process started, the premium that we credited Geis with was only $10 million, or I'm sorry, was $10 million, and then it was reduced to $8.5 because of the work done by Landmark and Agnew to improve their offer. Geis Company has a financing plan together. They have a good background. The Geis Company is located in Streetsboro. They've got a great history in the area, great development background, family-owned business, and we felt would be a good partner and really demonstrated through their efforts during the last few months. They had good mixed-use concepts. We felt that the county's tenancy really provided a redevelopment catalyst. They were creating a LEED Silver building for you. It was a great location along East 9th. One of the things that we want to remind people of is that this actually does absorb a huge chunk of space in the central business district that is currently obsolete and vacant and really unusable in our contemporary marketplace. The P&H buildings are 190,000 square feet of space that in their present condition are not very usable and would be extremely expensive to repurpose. This new construction effectively replaces them at nearly a 1-to-1 ratio, not exactly. The transfer of the property to the county at the end of the lease for $1 is an important consideration. The cost for new construction was surprisingly comparable to existing construction once we got everything together. It wasn't the cheapest option, but for new construction, we were very impressed. And this is obviously contingent upon the headquarters lease and the tax credits that are available at Ameritrust. We're getting to the end, and I thank you for bearing with us. To further reiterate the points that we've made as to really how good these proposals were, any of the offers that you were provided would be good offers in terms of economics. What the county pays today for some of its facilities, which as you know are just disjointed and a little inefficient, is a much higher number than what it would be paying in the build-to-suit project at Ameritrust. Especially once you escalate these costs over the next 20 to 26 years, the numbers would only be expected to go up. And we feel that certainly you could have picked any of these offers and basically been saving money. But, the one that you have selected here, or has been selected and is being presented to you, I should say, is the, $6.359 million estimate for year 2, compared with what is over $10 million of cost today for the current facilities. Last slide, I promise, is a overview of downtown, really highlighting some of the wonderful things that are happening in Cleveland today. Some of the development projects which are ongoing, planned for the near future, or very recently completed are highlighted in green. There's a number of them there. Some of these projects are very notable and everybody talks about them. The Medical Mart and Convention Center is right up on that list. Some of these are happening, but don't get as much notoriety. But I think it's important that we recognize that there's an awful lot going on in our landscape today. And, the build-to-suit and the repurposement of the Ameritrust complex fits very nicely into this entire picture. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We also have opportunity for presentations. We also have an opportunity for presentations. Has anyone signed in for presentations?
Yes, Madam President, Kahim Shoshed.
Come on.
Good evening, Council President, Council members, County Executive Fitzgerald, and members of the general public. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address this council as it prepares to make an important and historic decision on behalf of Cuyahoga
I'm sorry,
County
did you state your name and who you're representing?
and all its representatives. I am Chaim Shochet of Optima Ventures. My firm has invested very heavily in downtown Cleveland. That's because with the right decisions, we believe downtown Cleveland is on a cusp of a major renaissance. We believe in Cleveland and Northeast Ohio. As you know, Optima participated in the RFP process that the county initiated to consolidate many of its offices under one roof and separately to sell some of the county-owned assets that were no longer in use and were becoming a financial burden to the county. We finished second in the county's initial review, and obviously we were disappointed, but I'm here today to tell you, as simply as I can, why selecting Optima would be the superior choice for Cuyahoga County. Please know that on the day the recommendation was announced, the media called me for comment. I declined comment because I wanted to first study and compare our offer to the offer that has been recommended. My team and I have now done that in meticulous detail, and I must tell you, and I hope you can agree with me, that picking Optima would not only save the county a significant amount of money, but would also trigger many benefits for downtown Cleveland that are difficult to quantify. I'm going to go through multiple points in some detail that show why Optima's offer is clearly superior. Perhaps the most compelling reason to select Optima is the economics. I don't know what calculation metric was used in net present value, but I don't know, exactly how they did it to add up the numbers and the proposals that are being presented to you. But using the information that both Optima and Geis provided, the county would be paying an average of $2 million a year more over a 26-year period by going with the recommended proposal. That's a 35% premium a year. Our offer to house the Cuyahoga County's offices in the 925 building would cost $22 per square foot. The other offer would cost an average of $33 per square foot, and that offer does not include utilities and other costs. The proposal before you hinges upon different and significant debt restrictions, including the need to raise funds to build the new county office buildings. If they are unable to acquire financing, what happens then? Please remember that every day of delay is more money out of the county's pocket. Optima's proposal does not face such restrictions and potential roadblocks. If Optima is selected, there are fewer questions and fewer potential problems. We are ready to move forward now. I would also like to talk for a few moments about how this process came about. It started when the administration realized how much money it was costing the county and its residents to operate out of multiple facilities, and when realized their government would be more efficient under one roof. Let's look back 26 years. Where was the county then? How many facilities were they in? What was their cost to operate their facilities? These are all very important questions that each of you need to be asking. You need to ask, where will the county be in 1 year, 5 years, 15 years, and 26 years? What will their needs be? How will your space programming and technology work? I am fearful that with the proposal before you, you are being asked to task future county leaders to address an issue that could be addressed now and for the foreseeable future. If in several years the county's needs change and you require less space, you would still be required to pay for the entire square footage being proposed. And in the event you need more space, you would need to start leasing space across multiple buildings around the current proposed site and beyond. What happens to the efficiencies then? What happens to being under one roof plan? What happens to the overall economics of this deal? Does the county turn around and start this process all over again? Do they not exercise their $1 option and lose the entire premium they paid for the option? Do they exercise the option and become busy with trying to recoup a small percentage of the premium they paid? And what if, in a perfect world, the current proposed site is the amount of square footage the county needs today, tomorrow, and in 26 years from now and beyond? What then? At best, they will either be incurring millions of dollars in costs to refurbish their space and replace some of the base building systems that will be at the end of their useful life. I don't know the answer to any of these questions that I had just asked, but one thing I can tell you, with the Optima proposal, they don't have to be asked. It's true that after 26 years, according to the recommended proposal, Cuyahoga County would own the new office building that is being proposed. Please understand that after 26 years, the building will no longer be new. The county, in the year 2040 or so, whenever it takes title to this new office building, would inherit expenses needed to upgrade the building, expenses that could include items such as new roof, new HVAC, and etc. Operating a 26-year-old office building is not inexpensive. Optima proposed discussing with the brokers and the administration on how to address the potential of the county needing to reduce its footprint over time. Thereby, the county would not incur costs for space it does not need. Additionally, we provided contiguous floors to be reserved for the county's future growth. If and when this would happen, this would just continue the vision of today, realizing the maximum efficiencies by being under one roof. Also, at the end of the 26-year period, the county would not have any financial responsibilities for its space or any of the building systems. Optima would assume all the financial responsibility and risk. I also want to touch upon what few may be excited about, the concept of a new building. What is being proposed is a newly constructed office building on the current site of the H&P buildings. I don't know the quality of the building or the interior design of the building, but from the looks of it, it will be a vanilla box, utilitarian at best. And while downtown Cleveland does indeed appear to look as if it's headed in the right direction, there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. Ladies and gentlemen, the last thing downtown Cleveland needs right now is a new building. Building a new building will add to the existing glut of office space. Optima is proposing a unique opportunity for the county to take an historically significant, beautiful, and strong structure and repurpose it into a truly civic space which the county deserves. The only thing that would remain are the actual bones and architecturally significant components of the building. The rest of it, the build-out and all the base building systems, would be new and LEED certified. This would make Cuyahoga County a real catalyst and national example on how to repurpose its great assets and create a truly efficient county government under one roof. One of the other exciting things about the Optima proposal was that it created a building within a building. The county would have its own dedicated secure entrances, lobbies, elevator banks, and secure areas. The county's entrance would be on both 9th Street and Chester Avenue. The other building within this building would enter on the other side of the street. They would not have access to the county lobby or spaces without going through security at the county's different entrances into its lobby. The exciting thing about this is that the different agencies, whether city, county, state, federal, or other institutions such as the school board and other agencies, would be able to occupy these portions of the building, giving them all the ability to interact with one another on a more constant basis and realize synergies where possible. This is a holistic approach that cannot be provided at the proposed site and should be considered. Additionally, Optima proposed purchasing the Ameritrust site and turning the tower and 1010 buildings into high-end apartments, office space, and retail space. Optima also proposed providing the rotunda space for council chambers or some other public use that would reopen the doors of the significant structure to the public. With the Optima plan, we would truly be re-energizing not just one site, but several sites at an important and historic intersection in Greater Cleveland. The Optima proposal also ensures that the historic Huntington building stays in use and that the Ameritrust site be put back into use. The positive impact it would make would be substantial. I also now want to raise some technical concerns with the RFP process. There were instructions to clearly adhere to the process and questions that were the brokers and county and questions that when the brokers and county would do its scoring, it would be able to do a true apples to apples analysis. In reviewing the scoring process, Optima found several mistakes that the scorers have made. I have outlined some of these and will provide them to you. The most notable one would be in the economic score. When Optima asked if the county would want a higher disposition price in exchange for a higher rent, we responded to in RFP under Section D7 that this would not be looked upon favorably. Yet in the scoring, the winning proposal received points on Initiative 1 for offering a higher purchase price on Initiative 3. And since they were the highest bidder on Initiative 3 and their purchase was contingent on being awarded Initiative 1, I must assume they were given extra accommodations and all the other developers were not playing on an equal playing field. I also just want to point out that the signage we had proposed was on both Chester, 9th, and Euclid Avenues, and you'll see that in the papers I'm going to give to you as well. I also want to point out that on page 10 of the appendix that was put together by the scoring committee and presented to council on Tuesday, December 11th, I have tried several ways and cannot come up with the numbers that have been assigned to Optima. They are overstated by more than $1 million a year. I have attempted to get answers to such questions, but so far has not been successful. I believe that from an economic perspective and all the other considerations within the RFP, that the Optima proposal stands to be the best and most effective for the county. Although this process has taken longer than everyone wanted, I am still confident that Optima would be able to meet its timeline of Q1 2014 or be very close to it. With the current proposal, the timeline would go out much further. Has the county estimated the cost to occupy their facilities for that extended period of time? And lastly, After hearing this proposal would be looked at holistically and each initiative would not be addressed separately as the RFP suggested, I sent a letter to the county executive on December 20th offering a combined approach. I offered the county a 26-year term with an average rent of $23.61, still about $10 cheaper a square foot than the recommended proposal, and I offered the county to own its space at the end of 26 years for a one-time payment of $10 million. This is still far less than the numbers you are currently looking at and provides the following. It gives you the opportunity to decide what direction to take in 26 years. Does the county want to own its space? Is that the best use for its time, managing its real estate? Does it want to make the capital investments into the building systems and space? If yes, then this option provides the flexibility to decide at that point in time, not requiring the county to pay for the option 26 years in advance. If the county decides that it is not in their interest to own their real estate, they can continue to lease space, requiring the landlord to incur all the base building risk and provide for a space overhaul. I also increased my offer to purchase the Ameritrust site for $30 million and maintain my commitment to develop the site in compliance with different LEED certifications. While I feel our original proposal as a standalone is a better option for the county than the alternative, and it is still on the table, I am also placing this option on the table to provide the county with another option. Thank you for taking the time and for allowing me to speak here tonight. I just want to reiterate that the decision you are being asked to make is a tough one, and each of you should consider carefully the different options you have before you. I will be leaving copies of what I presented to the county on December 18th, as well as a letter I sent to the executive on December 20th. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very much. Are there other presenters?
Madam President, there are none that I'm aware of.
We have before us the original resolution, but since the date of the introduction of the original resolution, there has been a request by the administration to provide a substitute bill. And I'd like to call on our law director to give us a brief explanation as to the reason for the substitute.
Thank you, Madam President. Actually, the request was by the law department. A couple of reasons. Number one, there were some typographical mistakes in the original resolution. Number two, clarify that URS was also part of the consulting team. And thirdly, was for the comfort of the title company. They're used to seeing language normally from corporate resolutions as to authorizing the executive to do X, Y, Z. Our resolutions tend to be more general, so they wanted to list every potential document that is in a situation like that. So it adds all these additional documents that may be involved in the transaction instead of just a general statement that all documents that necessary for the transaction. Those primarily are the revisions. It's in Section 4 and in some of the whereas clauses, just clarifying the evaluation committee and the correct square footage numbers.
The substitute resolution has been circulated. If everyone is satisfied, I would entertain a motion to adopt the substitute resolution. Yes, Mr. Miller.
I move that the proposed substitute resolution be substituted for the one that was originally introduced, making it the version that's before this committee.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Mr. Schrein. Any discussion on that? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the ayes have it. We will we use now the substitute resolution. This is in a committee of the whole, and I would like to request that we have a motion to refer this matter to the entire council for second reading on January the 8th. So there'll be no action at this time other than to refer this to the council for second reading. And then we would have a third reading on January 22nd.
So move.
And moved by Mr. Schrein and seconded by Mr. Rogers that we move this matter to the regular council agenda for a second reading on January the 8th. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Any other discussion? Any other items that we need to, any miscellaneous business? Or is there any other public comment?
No, Madam President.
Right. I'd like to remind everyone that if you need your parking pass stamps, you can check with the clerk. I would like to thank our court reporter. I think our fingers are probably falling off. The gentleman from Optima was most efficient but spoke very quickly. So if there's no other items for the agenda for this evening, I'd like to thank all of you for coming and being with us this evening, and we stand adjourned.